Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
Former gubernatorial candidate and eBay CEO Meg Whitman takes the reins at ailing Hewlett-Packard. Nurses staged the largest one-day strike in the history of the state, protesting for better benefits and patient care. A $44 million settlement for the 2007 Costco Busan accident that sent 53,000 gallons of oil into the bay. Also, a snapshot of poverty following a recent U.S. Senate report showing levels have risen across the U.S. and sharply in California. Coming up next. Good evening, I'm Belva Davis, and welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me on our news panel are Paul Rogers, San Jose Mercury News environment writer, Sudim Tanawala, an Associated Press reporter, and Aaron Ricadella, Bloomberg News technology reporter. Aaron, what does it say about HP, the fact that they're bringing Meg Whitman on as their new CEO?
You know, Hewlett-Packard is an icon of Silicon Valley. They helped create Silicon Valley. This company was started in the 1930s out of a garage by Hewlett and Packard. It grew to become a behemoth. They helped create the template for tech startups who got big. They've fallen on hard times recently. This is a company that's fired 3 CEOs in the last 6 years. Most recently, Leo Apotheker, who was just let go just yesterday. I think the HP board is hoping that Meg Whitman can provide a steadying hand, maybe quell some of the dissension in the executive ranks, get this sprawling company moving as one again.
What is the problem? Is it a loss of focus for the company or a loss of just having personalities clash at the board level?
There are a few problems at HP right now, one of which is the sprawling size, and in some ways HP is a true conglomerate. They have a $41 billion a year PC business. They're the biggest PC maker in the world, bigger than Dell, bigger than Apple. They've got printers. They've got computers and networking gear that sit inside these massive corporate data centers. So they do everything from the computer on your desktop to the computers that run the world's businesses. They also sell a lot of ink. They're in a number of businesses. How do you get this conglomerate with these independent fiefdoms rowing in the same direction? That's one problem. Secondly, this company does have a notably divisive board. Now, the current chairman, Ray Lane, who I've spoken with this week and a couple of times over the past month, would say this is not the HP board of old. This isn't the HP board that spied on employees and reporters and solicited phone records. This is not the board that fired Carly Fiorina or Mark Hurd. But yet, the people we talk to, our sources say there must be something institutional going on where this board keeps chewing through CEOs.
I guess one of the basic questions I have is, this is a pretty big step up business-wise for Meg Whitman. When she ran eBay, I think she left with about 16,000 employees there, and there's 300,000 employees at HP. And she's a billionaire already, so there's no guarantee that she's going to succeed in this job. Why does she want this job?
There's a couple of things going on here. On one hand, Meg Whitman, of course, had the failed gubernatorial bid. This is a chance for her, of course, to refurbish her reputation. Now, as far as the size, of course, she has run nothing of this size before, and she admitted to that, although she told me yesterday when I spoke with her that she has run large companies. She also pointed to her experience buying enterprise software, although that seems somewhat less relevant. I ran the numbers last night. Bloomberg has, of course, a wealth of financial data at its fingertips. When she left eBay in 2008, it was about an $8.5 billion a year company. HP will do $127 billion in sales this year. It's a much greater scale.
How much danger is really HP in? I know some analysts said this week that there's a danger that the company could. I know it's explored selling the PC business. Give us a sense of really how much trouble it's in. Where is the stock price compared to where it used to be?
Now, There's a couple of things going on here. One is the competitive landscape, and the second one is where HP stock is at. And I think this CEO change was in no small part because the stock was plummeting. Hewlett-Packard stock, according to our data at Bloomberg, is down since between the time Oppenheimer took over and the time that we first reported that he was going to be fired, 47% drop in the stock. Now, that's not good for anyone. Certainly shareholders were quite restive about this. The other problem is it makes HP perhaps vulnerable to a takeover. They couldn't have that situation. That was untenable. They needed to get that under control. On the competitive side, let's not forget, though, this is still a very profitable company. They've cut sales estimates, but they're still a behemoth. The problem is here that twofold. Number one, on the PC side, it's a commodity business. It's a race to the bottom as far as pricing and profits go. They have to duke it out with Dell. They have to duke it out with the Chinese PC makers. You know, do they want to be in this business or not? They need to evaluate this. On the other hand, in the places they want to go, enterprise computing, enterprise software for large businesses, you know, tough competitors out there.
But this Meg Whitman, are they sure she no longer has political ambitions and this is a stepping stone to another race or something?
She joined the board, and our sources say that she hadn't been the first to raise her hand and had to be coaxed into it. So this is another possibility. What Ray Lane, the former non-executive chairman and now executive chairman at Hewlett-Packard, had said he himself considered stepping into an interim CEO role and conducting a search. I don't think there were a couple of things going on here with the search. On one hand, they just did a search a year ago. They still had a lot of data points left over from that. Secondly, they looked inside. And what Lane told Wall Street yesterday was, we didn't see anyone who was ready to run this yet.
Well, more to come, obviously, from HP. This is just another leaf,
It's a soap
turning
opera.
over. Absolutely. Well, there is another story that captured our attention this week, and that was with the nurses of the larger Northern California area with this very large disruptive strike from nurses.
Actually, Belva, going Northern California and Central California, the strike affected 34 hospitals in total. The focus of the strike included workers from Kaiser Permanente and Sutter, which, as you know, are two of the larger hospital chains in the state. But the focus of the strike was on Sutter Health, where there are these ongoing contract negotiations between the California Nurses Association, the nurses there, and management. The issues there are, concerns on the nurses' side. They claim that management has come to the table with a range of concessions that management is demanding that nurses take. Among them would be increase in healthcare costs for the workers, cut in pay for new nurses who come on board, reduce retiree health coverage. But a lot of the nurses I talked to and the union officials I talked to said their main concern is for patient care. They say that the concessions that Sutter Health is demanding would reduce nurses' ability to advocate for patients. They would, encourage nurses to come into work when they're sick, which we all know could expose patients to their illnesses. So they've raised a broad range of concerns. Not the least of which was concerns about patient care.
Was the strike as big as promised? I mean, were there, you think, as many people involved as labor had said?
Yeah, it depends on who you talk to. Union officials were expecting 23,000 nurses to go out on strike, and they didn't have an estimate as the strike actually was going on, so they kind of were sticking to those numbers. The hospitals, Kaiser and Sutter Health, were saying that a lot of nurses ended up crossing the picket line, ended up showing up for work, weren't supportive of the union's tactics. So it's hard to tell, but still in the in the sphere of these nurses' strikes, it still seems like quite a large one. There were some strikes earlier this year at a Kaiser facility in Los Angeles, but that was only about 2,000 nurses. And there was a big strike last year in the Minneapolis area that included about 12,000 nurses. So this, it seems like quite a large labor strike.
This is a difficult time to be going on strike with 12% unemployment in California. And as I understand it, some of these issues, for example, on pay, they're being given the same amount of money, right? That's not a take back. So obviously they're taking a big risk to go out on strike, and all these other people are coming in and taking their jobs, at least temporarily. Where do they go from here? I mean, this was a one-day walkout. Is there going to be a longer action? Are they willing to risk that? Where do you think what's the next step in
Well,
this?
right now what's happening is there's actually an ongoing lockout. So you have a situation where at Sutter, and then I should mention the third hospital that was involved in this, Children's Hospital in Oakland, they did hire replacement nurses. The hospitals claim that these replacement nurses, as part of their contract, they have to be on for a certain number of days. So they cannot allow, they don't want to pay two sets of nurses, so they cannot allow the striking nurses to come back for several days. You know, the union officials say it's retaliatory, and this is a result of the decision to go on strike to begin with. But, you know, both sides told me, the union told me today that it is willing to strike again, and it's demanding that management take all these concessions off the table in order to continue the talks and the negotiations.
Sudhir, well, I have a bigger picture question. What does this strike say about the erosion of benefits at good middle class jobs? What do people think about that?
You know, it wasn't. It came up a little bit in terms of the conversations I had with some nurses, talking about how they're struggling to make ends meet, and how they're having to pay more. And when you increase the cost of their benefits, you're really eroding their pay. You know, the hospital claims that up until now, this is again at Sutter Health, that, you know, workers weren't paying for their health benefits. And so this is now time for them to, you know, start paying for some of these things so that they can continue to keep patient costs down at the same time.
Before we move on, the effect of it, was there an effect on patient care?
Not really. At least that's what the hospitals were maintaining. They brought in replacement nurses, and they said that Kaiser said that it was able to operate at full staffing levels, and Sutter Health said that, again, with the combination of the replacement nurses and folks who crossed over the picket lines, that they also were able to operate without any problems.
Thank you. And now finally a story where there's a settlement to talk about, a big problem where we've come to some conclusions. Tell us about how this came about.
I don't know how much people remember about this, but it was our own little Exxon Valdez in 2007, a 901 foot long cargo ship. The COSCO Busan was heading from Oakland to South Korea. It was heavy fog. They couldn't even see the end of the ship, and they made the probably wrong decision to sail anyway. The local bar pilot, a Petaluma guy named John Koda, was on the bridge of the ship with the Chinese captain. They weren't communicating very well. They looked at a little red mark on the electronic chart. Koda asked the Chinese captain, "Is that the middle of the bridge where I sail through?" Captain said, "Yes, I think so." He steered the ship right at it. It turns out that little red triangle was actually marking where the support tower of the Bay Bridge was. So he grazed the ship, created a 53,000-gallon oil spill, and we had the settlement announced this week where the shipping owner, a company called Regal Stone, and the shipping operator, which hired the crew and operated the ship, a company called Fleet Management, both based in Hong Kong, agreed to pay the federal and state governments $44 million to cover the cleanup cost and to pay for restoration of wetlands, birds, fish, and also more public access projects to beaches around the Bay Area.
Well, in addition to the oil spill, you also this week have some news about the state of the Bay.
Yeah, it's been a big week for the Bay, actually. There is a report that comes out every 2 years. It's a lot of scientists who have a conference called the State of the Estuary Report in Oakland, and they present all of their findings about animals and fish and hydrology and geomorphology and rising water levels and all the things to do with the health of the Bay. And essentially what this report found was there are three main areas where the Bay is doing better, three main areas where it's doing worse. Where it's doing better, there's a lot less pollution in the Bay than there used to be. We've cleaned up the sewage treatment plants, we've banned DDT, banned lots of other chemicals, PCBs, things like that. Second, we don't fill the Bay as much as we used to. We fill it almost not at all anymore. And finally, third, there's huge restoration of wetlands going on around the Bay. In the last 10 years, we've restored 10,000 acres of property, like old industrial salt ponds, back to habitat, tidal marshes for wildlife. On the downside, there's a lot of trash still going into the bay. There are a lot of invasive species. We also need $1 billion to finish all the rest of the wetlands over the next generations, the restoration projects. And finally, there are huge freshwater diversions. About 50% of all the freshwater that should flow into the bay is diverted to farms and cities, and so some fish populations are really shrinking because of that.
Well, going back to Costco Busan, are we still seeing effects of that oil spill today in terms of I don't know, birds and other species that are out there?
It's a good question, and apparently the answer is no. A lot of scientists have been studying this very closely. They've been studying the crab fishery, the herring fishery, bird populations. They estimated that 6,800 birds died. Up to a quarter of the herring fishery was killed during this event. But what we found in the settlement from the scientific studies is that the herring numbers are up to where they were before the spill. We're going to need a few more years where we know whether the bird populations have fully recovered. But so far, nothing seems to be crashing toward extinction.
Is this an exceptionally large settlement, or is it what one would expect to come out of
No,
this?
this is there's a law called the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 that passed after the Exxon Valdez spill. That's the law that requires the double hulls for tankers. This is the largest settlement in U.S. history under that, but it's not as big as like the Valdez spill, which was 200 times more oil into Prince William Sound than this spill. You know, that was $1 billion in fines.
Paul, what about the local pilot? We haven't talked about him. Now, how did he come to make such an impaired judgment, and where is he now?
Well, the National Transportation Safety Board did report afterward. They found that he was taking prescriptions for as many as 12 medications, a whole range of Vicodin, Zoloft, all kinds of stuff that they said impaired his judgment on the bridge. He pleaded guilty to criminal charges. He served 10 months in jail. He's out now, and as we reported this week, he has quietly asked the Coast Guard for his mariner's license back. He's 62, still has a few years before he retires, and the Coast Guard turned him down at first. He has appealed. We don't know exactly when they're going to make their decision, but if the Coast Guard gives him back his license, he'll be sailing big ships into the bay, again, potentially.
Will we see any evidence of this money being spent that's going to make the bay look better? Or?
Yeah, there are going to be some meetings in October starting in Oakland and other places where there are going to be community input on exactly which projects to spend and things like that. But basically places like Muir Beach and the salt ponds in the South Bay, you'll see public access and other types of work.
And were environmentalists pleased with the outcome of all of this?
Not entirely. They wanted more money spent on the wildlife and less on the recreation.
Okay. Well, my thanks to all of you for joining me here tonight. New U.S. Census figures released last week show poverty levels rose last year across the United States and dramatically in California. In a moment, a conversation with reporters for New America Media about their ongoing coverage of poverty in the Bay Area and other parts of the state. First, a clip from a video made by youth journalist Sean Shaver about his own sister's struggle with poverty.
I've been living out of my storage since January. Every day I go get some clothes, maybe for a day or two, and I leave and go wherever I can go. I have to call somebody and ask them, can I stay at their house, or maybe make arrangements. But every day I wake up and I don't know where I'm going to sleep. Sometimes people let me come to their house, sometimes they don't. It's just an everyday struggle. I've been trying to look for a job. I've even been on a couple of job interviews. When it comes time to give them my address, it's like, well, I don't really know what address to give them because I'm at this person's house, I'm at that person's house. And like, I never know where I'm going to be at, so it's hard for me to look for a job in a city if I don't know if I'm going to be in that city.
Well, joining me now are Sean Shaver, youth journalist with New America Media, and Jacob Seamus, reporter also with New America Media. Welcome to both of you to the program. Sean, why did you want to record this story with your sister?
Well, I thought our story needed to be told. It's not too many young people living out of their storage unit that I know, and it's just a lot of people like that out there that are in these deep and extreme situations where they don't have a place to go. A lot of young people are like that, and I just thought that the story needed to be told.
What were her spirits, not knowing where she was going to spend the day?
She was very depressed a lot of the time. Every time I spoke to her, she would complain about how she didn't deserve this because she had worked hard. She also went to college, SF State, and she figured that this was like beneath her, you know what I mean? And she just felt like she needed an outlet or someone to talk to, basically.
Jacob, how common is this story where people have reached the edge and sort of falling off the cliff, if not off it already?
Well, I mean, if you look at the most recent census figures that came out last week, it's not looking good. And according to the census, more and more people are falling into poverty across California. The numbers as of 2010 showed that 15% of the nation was living in poverty. In California, it's worse. It's about 16%. And in certain parts of California, if you look at some of the rural communities in the Central Valley, counties like Kings County, Fresno County, Tulare, Kern County, some of those figures get above 20%. So it's a bleak picture, and unfortunately more people are slipping below that poverty line. But I think it's important to understand how the Census Bureau measures poverty. They use what's called a federal poverty line, which is for a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 kids, that's $22,000 a year. So think about that for a moment. That poverty level, that's the same number that they use to measure poverty in the Bay Area and in California than they do in Georgia, in Mississippi, in Florida, Ohio. And we know what the cost of living is in California, and we know what the cost of living is in the Bay Area. So in a way, we kind of need to take these numbers with a grain of salt.
How's your sister surviving? I mean, is there support from friends or family or who? How is she surviving?
A lot of support from friends. She tries to go over her friend's house whenever she can. Family's kind of scarce. They're not distant, you know what I mean? She gets government assistance as well. So I don't.
In terms of food stamps? Or
yeah, food stamps. She gets that, and then she also gets like a check, you know, as well. But like sometimes she doesn't know, you know, where to get the check at because she doesn't have an actual home. She's living in her storage unit, basically.
And she spends her days just. Tell a little bit about the family situation because it is different. She's your stepsister?
Yes. Actually, she's my father's child, and my father lives in Arizona, and she's kind of like out here in California on her own, and like he's not really willing to take her in, and I don't really understand that or really know why. And then my mother doesn't really know her well enough to allow her to come to our home.
Okay. What are some of the other situations that cause people to get to this point? I mean, I know that some of the reports indicate that race is a factor, that blacks and Latinos are suffering more than others.
Sure, that's absolutely true. I mean, when you look at the statistics and you break it down by not just geography, but demography, and you look at some of the groups that are impacted, poverty is not hitting all people equally. That much is clear. In fact, when you look at black and brown people, African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, the poverty numbers jump to 27–28%. Okay, and when you look at things under a microscope and you go into certain communities that really are, for the most part, invisible, those numbers jump even more, which is why our organization thought it was important to try to do some reporting that would put a human face on some of this data. Because if you're living in the Bay Area in particular, a town like San Francisco, it's a wealthy town. And if you're living in a place like San Francisco, most folks are not going to go to Hunters Point, right? If you're living in the Oakland Hills, you're probably not going to go to West Oakland. If you're living in the greater Bay Area, you're probably not going to go to North Richmond. But these are some of the places with the highest poverty rates where people are really struggling, but they're invisible communities for the most part.
Quickly, how does education play into all of this? Or is it a factor, the level of education?
level of education. I think, you know, there's some correlating things that you could point to. I think the question is, how does poverty impact the ability of children to learn? To me, that's the question. And I think you see that as poverty rates increase, academic performance decreases, and I think the statistics would play that out.
We fare a little bit better in the Bay Area. Is that helpful in terms of getting people's attention to pay attention to this problem?
Well, you know, we are faring better in the Bay Area, but again, you have to understand that the cost of living in the Bay Area makes those numbers skewed a bit. And so hopefully stories like the ones that Sean is producing will make people take notice.
So Sean, you plan to do more?
Yeah, I plan to do more stories and get out there.
Okay. Well, my thanks to both of you for joining me here tonight. And I thank you for watching. You can tune in anytime at kqed.org/thisweek to catch up on complete episodes and segments, and to subscribe to our newsletter and podcasts, and to share your thoughts about the program. I'm Belva Davis. Good night.